I'm Alexandra Kreis, and you're listening to Outer Travel in a Journey. Journeying now for 30 years into the life and practice of yoga, I have met many who have taken interesting turns, went past extraordinary bumps, and reached unexpected places. People with whom I shared conversations about everyday struggles, intimate realizations, larger questions, ideas, and dreams. So today, I'm passing on the mic to one of them so we could hear and celebrate the wisdom in people's differences and experiences.
Welcome back to Outer Travel in a Journey. On the show today, I have Astrid Walsh, student of mine in yoga and Ayurveda, but based in Cork. And of course, she has her own profession. She is a visual artist, evolving into her own work between constellation paintings and various other things. Hi, Astrid. How are you?
Hello. Hi, Alex. Nice to see you.
Astrid, when I think of you, and we can't be in the same room right now, I always think of a good cup of Irish tea. I instantly smell it when I see you. I want to sit down and have tea with you.
There's nothing like a good cup of Irish tea.
There is nothing like it. And if you haven't had one, you can only have it in Ireland because that's the best place to have it.
Absolutely.
So we thought we'd come together today because Astrid did a panchakarma 12 years ago to save her eyes. That was a little bit like the last straw, it seemed to me at the time. And it's 12 years on, and you've been living with Ayurveda in other forms and ways. And so we thought we'd give you, dear listener, an insight of what that is like between the big intervention that is a panchakarma, which means the 5 rounds or the 5 jewels of Ayurveda, which is like a retreat where you get treated for a good amount of time through various intense or less intense practices. So I hand over the mic to you, Astrid, because you can tell us a little bit more. What got you to do the panchakarma in the first place? Maybe be a bit more specific than I have been.
Yeah. Well, I suppose the journey began in 2003 when I was treated for Lyme's disease. Don't know exactly how I got it, but presumably a tick bite. And I was treated pretty much conventionally with a quite intensive course of antibiotics for that. At the time, I also looked into some alternative kind of treatments, but I pretty much forgot about it then after a while, even though it clearly was still impacting my health. I think it really aggravated certain patterns that were possibly already there beforehand. So then in 2007, I noticed a flashing in my vision. And I was very aware of things that can happen with your eyes because I've had kind of quite myopic eyes for my whole, since I was a young teenager. So I was very aware. I pretty much knew what it was, and I went to the eye clinic, but they misdiagnosed it twice and sent me home, saying that it was a different thing, which was nothing to worry about. But I was worried about it because it wasn't improving, and I had this intermittent flashing in my left eye. So then I went privately and I got a fancy scan. And this doctor diagnosed me immediately with a detached retina. So he then proceeded to scare me half to death because I'd been living with this for about 8 months. And he basically said, you have to have surgery immediately. And he also started listing off a whole list of things that I would never be able to do again, including yoga and horse riding and other things. Like he just overwhelmed me with fear, which was already obviously there also. And so I just said I couldn't make that decision, and he gave me a week. And during that time, I went really, really deep into that dark place until I just realized I couldn't just rush into this, not after eight months. And I wanted to see what I could do for myself, to figure out what was going on, to heal myself. So then I began, well, my first thing was to find a consultant who would monitor my detachment, because there can be, usually a retinal detachment is an emergency. It progresses very quickly and it can lead to blindness. So it was quite an unusual, typical for me, but quite an unusual presentation. And approach also. So I found a consultant who agreed to watch and wait, which was such a relief. And then I went on a journey to find and Ayurveda, which had already been in my consciousness from kind of early days, when I found a Deepak Chopra book. And my parents had a few Deepak Chopra books.
I didn't know
merrily, diagnosed each other. We've been, diagnosing each other with our, different doshas. Wrongly, I might add. But anyway, it was a concept, and I researched it, and it was one of the only kind of healing modalities that looked at the senses specifically. So I knew I was on the right track. And well, you put me on to Dr. Ashwin Shastri in Hariharapura. My twin sister was getting married in India in 2009, and you've interviewed her about that. And we met on that occasion, and you told me about this clinic. So at the end of that trip, I spent a month in Hariharapura, which is in Karnataka. And it was pretty...
Can I stop you here for a moment?
Yes,
that
please.
Is already, that there's so many questions coming through already. I have the deepest respect for you for saying that you made this, decision of wanting to give yourself time. It could have gone, it could have gone backwards or whatever you call it. It could have just kind of turned out in a bad way. And my immediate question was, what was the tipping point for you to say, I'm not going to go with this conventional approach? And why did you fear this conventional approach?
That's a good question. Well, the tipping point was that dark night of the soul, when I really just went inwards, and I just waited to hear an answer. I also got support in that. I contacted a man who deals with kind of natural vision improvement, and he's retired, but I somehow managed to get him to talk to me on the phone. And he talked about trust and self-trust, and finding my own answer. And I knew, I'd been going around with this for 8 months. I knew its patterns. I knew it was stable, but I had to find it, and I had to find that, okay, if I make this decision and it goes wrong, it's my decision, so it was really that moment of, okay, for better or worse, but this is what I feel. And I went traveling. we went before the wedding. We went traveling for a few months, and I was away from the security of that. So, I was sure within myself that it was stable at that point. But it was that kind of just tuning out everybody else, tuning out the expert, You know, I hadn't found the other guy yet. The experts, it was like, okay, I just that inner knowing, you know, that people talk about, I just had to find it. And the frightening thing about what I was frightened of, because obviously there was some fear involved too. The fear of the surgery was worse than the fear of what would happen in some ways, because it's quite an invasive surgery. They basically pop your eyeball out of your socket and they insert gas into it. And the gas presses the retina back in place, and then they put a silicone ring around the eye and stitch it all together. And you have to, depending on where the retina has detached, you have to stay in the same position for about 10 days so that the gas bubble can hold the retina in place and it can heal. So, you know, it was a major kind of, plus surgery also brings, you know, further on down the line, brings like risks, glaucoma, cataracts. Any disturbance within the eye can increase your risk later on. So I didn't want to go down that road if I didn't have to. And disturb increasingly your fire, your internal fire as well from an Ayurvedic perspective. So because the body hasn't done the healing itself, it might kind of detach from the process of that. So then fast forward, you're now hearing about this, you're traveling, you decided to do it, and by some strange coincidence, I mean, it wasn't strange that we were in the same country, we were both in the same country, but then to see you once more after the wedding, just for a cup of tea in a, you know, in a random place, that was amazing. Where was it again? It was in Kerala. You were about to start training and we were on honeymoon. We were on group honeymoon with my sister.
The family honeymoon. And then, and exactly. And then we kind of talked about Dr. Ashwin. And and you went to see what someone can really do in a more focused way, instead of just having day-to-day Ayurveda consultations, but to really approach a doctor from this speciality. Can you tell a bit more about Haripura?
Well, it's a tiny village. It was a beautiful place to be. I was reading my diary, which kind of made me want to share about it. You know, talking about the senses, the sensual experience of being there is very, very powerful. There was a gurukula, like a traditional school, and you could hear them doing their lessons, and they used to wash in this big river kind of at dawn every morning, and it was very, very steeped in ritual. There was a guru who lived there that people would come visit. There were, you know, it was a very close-knit kind of community, and Dr. Ashwin had a clinic there for the local people, and he specialized in eye disease. And he had only just begun this clinic, you know, where Westerners would come, I think. I mean, it was only the beginning of that. I was the only one there doing Panchakarma at the time. There were two American students who came, and then there was a girl from Hungary who came for a while also to study. But the whole time I was there, I was like, they were just looking after me, which was pretty special.
And it's special to them as well. I mean, in India, it's still, I mean, you can show up as a white Westerner, and depending on how tall you are, what color of hair you have, they just kind of are in awe. And particularly in these kind of small little villages where it almost seems to them like, these people do exist in flesh. And so did you notice that as much in your treatment as in coming around to the village every now and then?
Not really in the treatment, but yeah, when I came out, like eventually, and started going for walks around the place, yeah, it was, I mean, I'd have crowds of children following me and, you know, trying to, you know, wanting to know more about me. And yeah, I definitely felt like, you know, an alien landed from a different planet, you know. So, but in the clinic, I didn't feel that at all. It was very, yeah, I didn't feel that. It was very kind of, you know, mutual. And I mean, I think he's probably even a couple of years younger than me, Dr. Ashwin. I was 32 at the time. I think he was 30. I was really surprised to see this young man. He had just got married, and you know, but like we had a good rapport, and his parents looked after me in terms of food. His brother did all the cooking, and his father would kind of chat with me and serve food, and later on his new wife came, and she was great. She's now part of the team there, and he had a few other helpers. So I mean, it was like, I mean, I was there for a month, and it was a very safe feeling place, you know. It was, yeah.
Why did you choose to be there for a month? And can you give us a bit more insight in the treatment?
Yes. Well, it was supposed to be 3 weeks, but I arrived there with stomach upset, totally terrible deli belly, as they call it. So it took me a while to stabilize. I had to, you know, he gave me herbs, and I had to wait till that was completely out of my system. And then I had a little sore throat, which is obviously part of that. And, you know, we had to wait. And so it was a real test in patience, because I was supposed to be flying home with my sister and other people. And I only had the 3 weeks, and I knew I basically that I'd have to fly home on my own, you know, the longer it took. And it took longer. And I just had to deal with it, you know. I was like, and I got into the flow of the other time dimension that I was in. So I just had to let go of expectation, you know. It's like, oh, you said 3 weeks, and now you're saying, you know, 4 weeks or 5 weeks. It was hard for me, and also, you know, I had so many questions, and I always wanted to know, and what about this, and what about that, and what about my dosha? And he, you know, he just said, you know, it will all become clear, it will all emerge in time. And it did. So the 3 weeks, so basically I took medicated ghee, and until my system was saturated with that. So depending on your digestive system, it takes a certain amount of time. So it took a few days. He would come kind of in the very early morning, and I'd go out onto, I had a little veranda, and he had a silver coin, and we faced east, and he would put the silver coin on my head, and then say some prayers, mantras, and then I would take the ghee. And like, I was just so grateful for that, you know, that care. It was like, he cares about all of me, you know. He's not just going straight for the eye. He's like, he wants my whole being to be part of this process, you know. And it was just so different from the experience I'd had before. So I was just really, really grateful for that. So then I took the ghee, and I could tell in my digestive system, I don't remember all the details, it, you know, became saturated. I remember at one point it felt like all my cells were tingling, everything in my body was tingling, and Dr. Ashwin said it was like the ghee kind of saturated, and the kind of the struggle of my cells with releasing the toxins. You know, it was a really interesting way of thinking about it. And then when my body had absorbed all it could absorb, I can't quite remember but I think then I had I got steamed, and it was literally a pressure cooker attached to a kind of a box, and I sat in it with my neck sticking out. So I think we did that for a couple of days, and then it all had to come out again. So he gave me herbs, and I spent a day recording my bowel movements, which were plenty fun. And yeah, I mean, that was intense, like very, very intense.
What
And I
part was
remember
intense? What part
the
was
letting it
intense?
all go was intense. The let it all coming out was intense. It was the fear that it brought up, the, you know, oh my God, like feeling lightheaded and going, oh my God, is this part of the process? Am I gonna die? You know, it was like, and just everything just coming out of your body was just, it was quite a lot. And I felt at that point I could have done with a bit of reassurance, but I had to go through it. I had to let it happen, you know.
It's this part of surrender where we stop making logical connections to healing and what's happening. And because you are, as you say, you know, you wanted to know everything you said earlier, and where we have to surrender to the law of nature that we not often do unless, you know, whatever, there's a thunderstorm and we can't stop it. We have so many ways to protect us from nature that we don't realize how little we trust the process that's going on out there.
Absolutely. And I wanted to stop it. I wouldn't, you know, I couldn't. You had to go through it. It's like, you know, childbirth or whatever. There was only one way, and that was through.
Wow. And what else did you encounter? Did you get other treatments? Because I remember you coming back and saying you got very little treatment. There was also a lot of kind of talking going on between the two of you. Like,
did I say that? Yeah, that's interesting. I don't remember. I mean, we did another range of treatments then once I had done that, the massage and all that stuff. So I had Abhyanga massages, Shirodhara, which is, you could explain
Can you describe it?
Oil is dripped over your temples, which is just amazing. And then the Tarpanam, I think it's called, where they built a kind of a well around my eyes and filled it with medicated ghee,
which is clarified butter for those who haven't heard.
Yeah, exactly. And then after that, after the Tarpanam, I would lie down for at least an hour, I think, with my eyes covered to rest the eyes. So that went on for maybe a couple of weeks, those treatments, or a week and a half, that I'd have maybe 2 treatments a day. I can't exactly remember the schedule. But yeah, there was a lot of time. I had a lot of time just by myself. And he would come and talk, and he gave me books to read about Ayurveda, and a little book with prayers, and that was all fascinating. I mean, I can't even I even remember, but one thing he said, which I just came across again, that every illness brings death with it to a certain degree, you know, and like that's really how I felt about the retinal detachment. And you know, it was just showing me the death, you know, the reality of death, blindness, you know, terror of blindness. As a visual artist, you know, I'm overly reliant on my eyes and, you know, visual pleasure, and blindness, you know, kind of equals death for me. So it was, you know, it was really kind of coming to grips with, you know, the reality of death, and also seeing that, you know, I mean, our
death
culture,
of an identity, the death of an identity, right?
Exactly, absolutely, yeah. That's it, the death of, and just finding then what was left after all of that. But just like, even also seeing from the chats with him that, you know, that I came from a culture that where death is, you know, the absolute worst case outcome, as in it's the worst case scenario. Whereas, you know, from his cultural perspective, eternal rebirth is the worst case scenario, as in, you know, just to see that you know, there are different ways of looking at it, and death, the way we see it, isn't necessarily the only way to see it. And you can see it in our culture at the moment, you know, the fear, the absolute terror, the death, you know, counting the numbers. And I think, and it's totally understandable, because that's how we see it in our culture. It's the end, you know, it's loss, it's darkness, it's so yeah, it was having to go into that and explore it, and having some support exploring that was just amazing. So it was so much more than just treatment, is what I'm trying to say.
And that, I think, is just the why Ayurveda is so difficult in modern times, where we live where we are very fast paced, and where we have to almost learn patience. If I think about artists, I always think they are a little bit more patient than I would be, because you do have to go into this melting process of, you know, making space to see what you do. You know, it's never straightforward. I designed this, or there's very few people who do that, you know, or write a symphony, or it has to just, there has to be room to hear what wants to come through, or how you are inspired. And but still, as you say, even if you have that kind of patience already, it can be something else if you want to attach yourself to a fast and positive outcome. And in one way, you threw that out of the window by saying, like, I'm not getting an operation, so I might as well. And in other ways, there was the hope that now you had found the Holy Grail. So everybody's probably already wondering, so did it help? You know, was that a helpful treatment?
Exactly. It's you've touched on so many of the things, the attachment to the outcome, just the extremes of, I mean, what you were saying there about art. I mean, I think most artists, you know, they have the vision, they want this, you know, they want to produce this, and it never becomes what you want it to become. So it's a constant letting go of your expectations. And I had to let go of so many expectations. It wasn't a silver bullet. It didn't suddenly my, you know, retina healed. I remember there was a day, there were several times during my stay there where I suddenly had super clear vision without my glasses on for brief moments.
Yes.
They were brief moments, but I still, you know, experienced it. And over time, like panchakarma takes time to work. You know, it's the time after.
Yes.
I mean, it immediately then, when I was there, I lost weight. I lost all the weight that I put on while traveling through America and Canada and eating incredibly denatured food, and all of those impressions. Like, I felt lighter. I felt more able to cope, and that was just within that time. I felt excited about the future. And it gave me a sense of okay, yeah, I've cleared the deck and I can move on from here. I did end up having surgery in 2010, but by that stage,
that was a year later, right?
It was a year later. Yeah. It was only a year later, actually. But by that stage, I wasn't frightened when I had the surgery. It's almost a pleasant, like it's not a bad memory, you know. I had the surgery. Even though I moved city, I ended up with the same consultant who scared the living daylights out of me. And he was like, oh, hello, 3 years later. And which I just think is very good, like that I had to face him. And he did a great job. And I didn't, I think if I'd have been forced into surgery at that time, it would have been traumatic. actually. Whereas when I had it, I was just at peace with it. And yeah, I stayed with my mom and she, lay on the sofa in the same position for 10 days. And people brought me lovely, I asked for green things to eat if anybody asked if I needed anything. And loads of people gave me audiobooks. And yeah, and every time I get an eye check, they're always very surprised that my vision is so good, that I haven't had that there was no deterioration in my vision. I still have a little shadow and a little flash every now and again to remind me, but it's like an old friend now. It doesn't terrify me every time it happens. And, there's been ups and downs. I mean, I did have to have another surgery because of the first surgery, like just a mechanical thing, not, what can you do? But yeah,
but what I love about you, sorry.
No, go on.
What I love about your story is that it doesn't devalue either techniques, like Ayurveda helped you along on a different level than you thought, and it might have kind of helped you to come out without trauma, which might have caused other damages in your system. And so it was a hand-in-hand experience, as I hear it. Some people might hope that, okay, then that's not my thing. No, if it can't do the one thing that other systems can't do, then I don't want to do it. But again, it shows to me that Ayurveda always is about everything. I'm sure at this point there is an Ayurvedic operation system. I think I heard even about it, that there is operations within Ayurveda, and just this particular doctor wasn't catering to that. So was he ever positive about you healing, or was it for him also the aspect of what needed to heal in you to move on?
You mean Ashwin?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, he was like, stop focusing on the outcome. He was like, you're trying to, you're like, it's not about the outcome. And it's about, he talked to me about attachment and, suffering coming from attachment, which is funny that I had a retinal detachment, but like it is, I mean, you can look at all of this very metaphorically. He talked a lot about attachment, and he talked me through a lot of, I was always grasping, my mind was always grasping for certainties when I was there. And in fact, I think, if it had been the silver bullet and I had magically healed my eye, I don't think it probably would have been the thing that I needed to learn. I think I needed to learn the subtlety, the gray areas, the, that you can have, you can want something, but you can let it go of the necessity to get it at the same time. It's holding the two things at the same time, which is so difficult. And I'm obviously still working on. Traditional medicine and Ayurveda, they're, we need them both. We do. It's kind of, and I just hope it would be great if we could get more easy about going between between the things,
Yeah, because what people don't know, and I hope I'm okay in revealing this, you were very very much pro meditation and all this. I remember there was this moment when you got sick and you kind of moved away from the big city, Dublin, to the countryside in order to slow down and look at your life and find rhythms of meditation and yoga and herbs, and you got interested in herbs, and you were very kind of keen on believing in the natural way of healing. And for you to then come around years later to say, like, I'm having an operation, that was such a big mind shift in the first place. That's what I recognize. And so you are almost like becoming an advocate, as like me, and anybody I know who's been longer in these healing worlds, to bring both together and to fuel assistance of these different techniques. Yeah. And to be inspired by each other and not repelled.
Exactly. Yeah. And to know which is appropriate, you know. So, and I think, you know, that brings us to what we started with when we were talking about, I don't know, was it recording, but, you know, the big interventions, which this kind of was, versus, or along with, then, you know, I came home. He didn't really tell me how to go, what to do when I got home. You know, I was expecting a big reveal at the end, and he basically told me, you know, no spicy food, no fried food, reduce sugar, and be a good person. You know, I was like, what? Is that it? And not to worry too much. But you know, be a good person though. I mean, you know, like that was good advice. And you know, but then it took another, you know, few years until then, you know, I enrolled with you. I mean, having known you, but on the Creating Space program, where it's all about, you know, living day to day, and how do you, you know, because it's the small details that make up your life, and how do you make them so that they're supporting your life, and that they're supporting the life of your community and the life of the planet only. You know, so that's a whole different thing, and I think that's what we're coming into, hopefully into a phase now where it's all about, you know, how do we live our lives day to day, because I think so many of us are just trying to get from one end of the day to the next, one end of the year to the, you know, and just get through it. And we have to get past just getting through it, because so much gets damaged if we're not paying attention.
That,
you know. So learning to, you know, like I just remember the pared down existence I had in Hari Harapura, where, you know, I'd wake up naturally, and, you know, I did whatever, have my gear, whatever it was that was going on, and, you know, the day that, like, I was just so in tune with, like, when the lights went out, that was it. Often there was a power cut, you know, you dead because it was dark, you know. And I had my little rituals where I'd escort all the little ants out of my bedroom before I went to sleep. That was my little thing to do. And then in the morning they were all back again, you know. And I just thought that was so, it's like you work so hard to clear your mind of all the, like, worries and the thoughts, and, you know, and then the next day they're back again, and then you just have to start again. You know, so
fantastic comparison.
Yes. So, and it's very hard, like, without support, to make lasting changes, even in small things. And I think we're probably running over time, are we?
I was just looking at the time. We got into quite a conversation, and as you said, you wanted to finalize and say, so what do you feel you want to bring together in this kind of big intervention, small gradual changes? How important is one and how important is the other? Or what is it that kind of caught you in what you experienced initially? Like, it's when you go into panchakarma, you are being treated. And one friend of mine said, it's like, oh, when I get home, it's like, who's going to cook for me? Who's going to feed me? Who's going to massage me? Who's going to dress me? You know, that kind of sensation of you can totally let go, because everything almost is taken care of.
All you need.
And then you're not. And then when you go into these small principles of Ayurveda, of the daily routines, nothing is taken care of. I mean, you really have to work these things. So maybe you can say something towards that once more.
Well, I think it talks about the, you know, holding two things at the same time, you know, that you can only have the energy to do these things for yourself. You know, it's all self-responsibility in these making the choices that you're making every day. But you can only do that if you feel supported in some way, you know. And I think getting support for yourself is the most important thing. And I mean, I do think the big interventions can be amazing because they can just give you, you know, a clear start, like clearing out your house, or, you know, it can just give you a good place to start, you know, whatever, halfway up the mountain or whatever. It can just fast track you a bit if you need, you know. You know, and sometimes big interventions are necessary because sometimes you just have to act now in a big way, because otherwise, you know, often maybe it's because there isn't time, or because, I think sometimes big interventions are definitely appropriate. But then after that, you know, the new reality, you have to be able to integrate the new reality. And that takes time and patience. The big interventions also take patience, but you know, but to just keep reapplying and reapplying and reapplying.
And they need space to be adapted to. And a lot of people do these Panchakarma shoppings. You know, they kind of go, oh, I go once a year for a very short time. And they take very little time to come back to the modern, fast-paced world where they feel like they can't have their pitch study or whatever it's being. I mean, you got very little advice because that seems not to be related to your eye. But a lot of people who do a regular Panchakarma, not a specialized one, in the sense of like, okay, I go and get massages, I take my steam bath, they come back and then they falling into this world and being tempted by everything around us, and there is no system of support. And because there is no system of support, and we're feeling good when we're coming out, and there is a lightness and the possibilities, it's often been overlooked that you're doing more harm not taking the time, because what happens is you're so open that your system absorbs everything much deeper than what you've come from. So what I heard you say, you were surprised of how little advice you got, but
yes, I could have done with a bit of guidance at that point, but I don't think he could have guided me because I was going back to a completely different culture. He couldn't tell me to live like a rural Indian. I kind of had to figure it out myself. Culture, the culture is obviously very important in it, which is, what is great in your work as well is that you live in the West and you have made things accessible to people from a Western background, which if you look at the classical texts, obviously, or even some of the English writings on Ayurveda, you could get bamboozled very quickly. But you've distilled out the core points.
You do. You need
Thank
to
you for all the
out.
work, I'm sure. Pardon?
You do need to distill them out. That's true. And but that brings me back. I was asked yesterday by someone in the course. We played this game of like, we all are so knit together here at this moment in time. We're really interested in the person beyond, the coaching and the Ayurveda. And so we did a game of, this is what I always wanted to ask you. And I was asked, what is it like to be so steeped into Ayurveda, because my family lives it with me, I'm coaching it, I'm getting people that I don't know to come and do it. And I said, I still feel like an imposter. I feel like somebody who is only learning while I'm going, and I'm learning and learning and learning. And I can only bow my head to all the big people that are really going a little bit deeper than I do, and really absorb it and communicate it on a deep, deep level on top of what I do. And yeah, so it's constant sensation of like there's more, and yeah,
Totally.
it's a curiosity that drives me, to be honest, and there is never that sense of completion, and I think that's just life then in the end, it's like
Mhm.
and Ayurveda is just life. It's not like a 10 rule system. It's not the Bible. It's not, the 10 commandments. It is what it is. It's always an on-take of life. And as life is changing constantly, it's so unpredictable. So unpredictable. We need to just stay curious. Yeah. Which you
Yeah.
did.
And there's a certain security in knowing that it's unpredictable and that it's supposed to be unpredictable, and to kind of, if you have these things that can anchor you in your daily life, I am more likely to, to not get knocked over when, life does take a different turn. It's that kind of like, it doesn't fix everything. It doesn't mean, you're never going to be sick. You're never going to have health problems.
Yes.
But it just gives you the stability to be able to face them and not get panicked immediately, not react immediately. It's that, okay, this is just another trip around the merry-go-round. And I
This is the
recognize
ants
it and I
coming back
recognize
to the door.
myself. I know my ants. Yes, I know them all by name. This is how I react. This is how my brain tries to get to
Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
reassured, secure, and yeah.
Astrid, what was it exactly you wanted to talk about when we talked about this difference between being treated and having big interventions and then kind of coming into a total different lens of Ayurveda, these daily routines? What is it that kind of happened for you in staying with Ayurveda, or what did inspire you to follow the
Well,
path?
there is what you mentioned, the daily applications, the daily rituals, or just habits, how we live our lives, which is always in tune with the natural cycles. And one thing that I've found really powerful for me is there twice a year, the cleanses, the kind of fasts that in Ayurveda, there's in spring and in autumn, that you can do on your own at home with support if you don't know what you're doing. But I've found that has become a real anchor in my year. And it just sets me up for the next 6 months. It's a little bit like it just removing all the excess so you can see what is necessary. So you remove all the things that are throwing you around emotionally, like sugar and coffee and that kind of thing, and you simplify your food and you simplify your life. And I've always found like a profound change through doing that. And and I really look forward to it. And because I did the massive panchakarma intervention, I also know like you can do it deeply, or you can, there's different levels. At every level you are at, you can start, which is the amazing thing. And no matter what your circumstances, you can find a way of building it into your into your yearly calendar. And it's just emotionally more than anything. It's
Exactly.
like it has a stabilizing kind of effect.
And it's because we do it ourselves, the cleanser, so it's an at-home retreat. So you don't need to travel far. You can't travel at the moment. So it's in that way, it's ideal to experience a little bit of what we are using our holidays for. You go to a different place, and because you're in a different place, you look differently at your life. And these Ayurvedic cleanses, they're not only about the food, they're more or less about how you set yourself up and where you want to be, to remove the things that you daily do, and then move on into that experience of what do I want to get rid of. And because you're doing it yourself, there you will never overstep step the limits or that you kind of have, or you will just go and hopefully be wise about what you get in feedback from your body. Yeah. So that's what I heard you almost saying there. You know, it's like that chance to do it at home and not to get locked into, not that we're not getting sick, but the sickness can't travel so deep if you keep an eye regularly on what is falling out of shape in you and what needs amending.
Exactly. It's like, it's just a check-in. It's like, what do I need now? Because we tend to kind of go, oh, I need, or you read something, I need to be eating this XYZ, but you don't check in with yourself whether this is actually doing you any good.
Yeah.
So, it gives you an opportunity to go, okay, is this good for me? Or is this, and it really helps you to negotiate what your own body is saying, because everybody is different, and there's no like catch all. there's no nothing, no diet or whatever that will suit everybody. So and we have to learn to, I'm still learning to listen to those signals. So it's a really good opportunity to just go, okay, simplify, and then go, okay, this is making me feel good, this is not making me feel good. And to do that twice a year, it's like a compass or something. It's like just checking, I'm on the right track.
And you get support if you do it with a group, which we usually do. You can do it, of course, alone. Some people prefer to do it alone, or some people just want to know that there is support if they want it, which you can use whatever way you feel you're in the mood for. Some people, they never show up for the calls, and then I get amazing details of shifts in their lives, but they were just listening in retrospect whenever they felt the system was ready to hear the next message that was being sent to the group. And that is amazing. You can open up whenever you're ready to open up. There's no peer pressure in doing the cleanse at the same time, or you can get all the information after, or when you can digest it.
Indeed.
You've been a witness, my dear listeners, you've been a witness to Astrid and my never-ending conversations, and we could still be talking, and I'm still intrigued and want to talk more, even though I know half of the stories. But maybe we bring this to a sweet ending here. What's your advice to the listener? What do you want to leave us with?
Oh, wow. Get support. Find somebody you trust, and get some. And it's fine to ask for help, basically. And the things that you're scared of usually aren't as scary as you think they are. The thought of the thing is usually scarier than the actual thing. That's a massive thing that I learned. The fear of the operation was 10 million times worse than the actual operation. And I think, and I don't know yet, but I probably think death is the same. It's probably not as bad as we think. And maybe we get to be born again and, have another round. You never know.
Yeah.
Be nice.
Who knows? Nobody can prove it yet. So
no.
We can just see it as another curious adventure. That's what I heard. What an artist said when he was dying, and he felt like he can say goodbye to the world. It's like he has lived through everything, and why not be interested and intrigued by death,
Exactly. Yes. And that takes courage, and we don't always feel courageous. So
Yeah.
finding people
Yeah.
to help be courageous is a good step.
Yeah. And not being courageous doesn't make you a lesser person. It just,
No,
no, like you got to find your
absolutely.
own pacing.
Yeah, exactly.
Wonderful. Thanks again, Astrid, for this insight on your story with your eye, how you approached it, and the insight of Panchakarma and Ayurveda. And I hope
Pleasure.
you stay in communication with the community through your art.
If you enjoy listening to my podcast, please consider to become a patron at patreon.com/Alexandra Kreis and pledge your donation.